So my name is Evan Snow. I'm the co-founder of Choose954 and Art Fort Lauderdale, the art fair on the water. We were presented with an opportunity to work with Adam Dolle here, and Megan, and the great people from BAWN, and all the other phenomenal organizations involved, League of Women Voters of Broward County, Moms and Man Action, and a bunch of congressmen and people who will be joining us tomorrow you'll find out about, to produce an event highlighting and showcasing Adam's series of artworks as part of this Flower in the Gun fundraiser that we're putting together to raise awareness about the issues that are unfortunately plaguing our country and community, not just from the Parkland tragedy, but throughout the country as well. So the point of today in the Meet the Artist event is to have a preview of Adam's exhibit here with all the works on display, and have a Meet the Artist Art Discourse Artist Talk with Adam Dolle, the creator of the series, as well as Laura Marsh, who is a noteworthy curator from the Hollywood Art and Culture Center, as well as a Yale graduate and a very accomplished experienced artist as well. So we will get right into it. Without much further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Oh, okay. This is going to be really redundant and probably pretty boring for some of you, especially my great friend Joe, who just came in today. Joe and I have known each other for nearly 40 years, and during that course of time, he has watched me change a lot. And you know, my life started out in the Midwest, and I studied to be a priest for 12 years, and 4 of those years were in a monastery. And in the mid-70s, I decided to leave that life, and I went to New York City and I started doing interior design. And I have a master's from Pratt Institute for interior design, and pursued that for pretty steadily for about 35 years. During the course of that career, 12 years ago, I was on a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, and I, with my yoga teacher, we were driving down this really dusty road, and we passed a for sale sign, and 4 days later, I was the proud owner of a ratty old kind of backpackers camp on the beach in Costa Rica, and that started another career. That is the career that actually in some respects helped to lead me to this point today, because the yoga, the experience of opening a yoga retreat on a deserted beach in the jungle in Costa Rica allowed me to see beyond what I was doing at the time. And it allowed me to think about other things than just about a career and the things which motivate people to go into their work typically. And it started me thinking about, you know, a type of spiritualism, I suppose. It's not really a spiritualism, but it's just an awareness of myself and the world. And so I, you know, over the course of this past 12 years, and working down there and meeting literally hundreds of really unique individuals, have changed the way in which I see my life. And so as I was getting closer and closer to that kind of the sword of Damocles, which is your retirement, I started thinking about what I was going to do. And so about 3 years ago, I moved back to Fort Lauderdale and had a number of projects, and I finished those things up, and I'm just at the tail end of a few things. And a year ago, I just decided that I was going to rent a studio in Fort Lauderdale. And so I've been working for about the last year producing most of the work that you see here. The original impetus for delving into these ideas and this work came from that black photograph back over there, which is actually a photograph of a table that I have in my house. And as I was renovating my house, I was thinking, I don't know what I was thinking when I came up with this idea. Honestly, I mean, you know, Evan and I and Laura and I were talking about my work and the like, and how I started with all this stuff. And I literally have no idea how that came to me. I mean, I think a part of it was, tell me if I'm going on too long.
That's a good intro. We'll segue to some more additional stuff. And we do have some additional chairs throughout here if you guys do want to take a seat. But Laura, why don't you, for those that aren't familiar with Mrs. Laura Marsh, tell us a little about yourself.
Oh, you have something to say?
No, you're good. I'm enjoying what you're saying about your work. Yeah, I'm an artist who curates. That's how I introduce myself, where, you know, like Adam here, I went to art school in the Midwest also, which is interesting, like in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, at the Cleveland Institute of Art, and then I had a dream of going to Yale, which was like sort of outside of like the way that I grew up, which was very rural, and a lot of my friends from Montrose, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, are BP testers for oil rigs, stuff like that, because that area is very, there's a lot of natural gas, there's a lot of oil in that area, very working class upbringing, and I was excited to have this conversation with Adam because for me, I know that we both have histories with guns, like in our houses and our communities, so mine was more of an entry point into hunting culture. My father hunted, his father hunted, they would get together and hunt during the seasons, and my school would be let off during every doe and every buck season for like the first day of the season, so there was a relationship to hunting and eating from the land that I grew up with. And then as an artist, I had to move out of my area because there's no arts community in Montrose, Pennsylvania. So I've lived in New York before, I've lived in cities like Cleveland that have changed a lot. I've visited places like Pittsburgh and Philly. And then I chose to come to Miami about 3 years ago because my life as an artist was coming in conflict with my livelihood to support myself as a curator. So I've taught, for many years I taught at universities and ran a gallery, and then came down here to work at the Art and Culture Center in Hollywood. And then my art practice is in Miami. So I kind of go between up here in Fort Lauderdale, down to Hollywood, down to Miami, and back and forth in what I call South Florida, a large metro area. People ask me about it all the time because I do a lot of driving, but when I grew up in Montrose, Pennsylvania, I had to drive 40 minutes to the grocery store. So my needs are still close by, but I can actually go between metro areas, and I travel all over the place. I was in Guatemala 2 weeks ago learning weaving, and I sew. So I grew up with a rifle and a sewing machine in my house. and I used the sewing machine. I recently talked to a friend about how I was jealous that I was a little bit of a tomboy, but my father wouldn't teach me about hunting, so I learned about sewing. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting pieces here and some really interesting statements. And I also work with text, so it's nice to see you working with text and image. I make banners that have text on them and also have a humor to them. So I'm seeing this kind of interplay between humor and seriousness, like the seriousness of gun violence. There's also, I can tell some of the molds seem like they're taken from toy guns also. So there's like maybe even a commentary on like masculinity.
Oh yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Interesting. Good observation. So needless to say, both have very distinguished and qualified backgrounds to lead them to this point. But why don't you tell us, Adam, what was the event that happened that led us to at least this weekend's Flower and the Gun fundraiser event?
So that's Peggy Guggenheim over there. My dog.
Real name.
Real name, Peggy Guggenheim. And I live over in Lauderdale by the sea, and Peggy and I were sitting on the beach wall because you know there's no dogs allowed on the beach in Lauderdale by the sea. And so we were sitting there, and this guy wanders over and said, "Do you mind if I, pet your dog?" And Peggy is like a great dog, but she can, she picks her friends and she'll snarl at people. And I thought, okay. So this guy plays with Peggy, the dog lover, and walks away, and as he turns around, he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm Ted Deutsch, I'm your congressman." So that began the ball rolling, because through a series of connections with people, friends, and acquaintances, clients, I came to find out that.
Sorry. Didn't want to drop an icon.
We'll figure that out. See, these pets, they have a life of their own, and they kind of like, you know.
He's not as prestigious as Peggy. He's a brute named Bert.
So, so it came about that I decided that I was going to do a fundraiser for Ted. His finance director down here came to my house, and she thought that the artwork was interesting, and I suggested that maybe what we could do is that we could have a fundraiser at my studio. And so Ted and his wife Jill and a woman named Gail Schwartz, who started BAWN, which is Ban Assault Weapons Now, came to the studio and we began to talk about this. Brutus, what are you doing?
He is Brutus, that's his nickname.
Exactly. So the thing basically grew from a fundraiser to you know, us having this tussle with this dog. And I became very interested after I met Gail and her story about losing her nephew at Parkland. And it was very kind of coincidental with the work that I was doing at that time. And so one thing led to another, and then we came to find out that Michael Franti was playing in the Tortuga Music Festival, and it was like Ted was like on top of it and got him, you know, committed to come here. So it came from a small event, which was like 30 or 40 people around my pool, to now what might be 300 people tomorrow here. And which is delighting me, because it gives us all an opportunity to spread the word about the fact that there are things that we can do to begin to limit the way in which our society is changing. And if it's not gun violence, it is immigration. If it's not immigration, it happens to be maybe income inequality. And if it's not that, it could be discrimination in many, many different forms. And it's like this whole, you know, it's like I was talking to my friend Jared, who's in here someplace, and, you know, thinking about the way in which our life in this society is like a fabric that's woven. And the fabric has like a nub to it. And so all of these issues like gun violence and discrimination and homophobia and equal rights for all people, all of them is like the nubble part of the fabric, but the thing that stitches it together is our common values and wanting to have common experiences. And that is what's unraveling at this point. So it's not just one issue that we need to be worried about or concerned about. Gun violence is a thing which is a horrible plague on our society, but it's only representative of the way in which our society is kind of unraveling a little bit. And so I come to this thinking that there are things that we as citizen activists can do to solve the problem. So that's what we're doing.
Beautiful. Kudos to you, especially, you know, coming off the heels of the one-year anniversary of the tragedy at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. You know, you can never have enough fundraisers and awareness events like this. So, you know, kudos to you.
But you know, Evan, part of what's going on in my life, and the more that I become familiar with the stories, is that there are countless stories of bereaved people that you never hear about that lose their child because somebody drives by and shoots their 6-year-old kid in their yard, or shoots somebody at a gas station or something like that. Those are the stories that are getting lost in the conversation about gun violence. And so not only are we worried about banning assault weapons, which is one thing, but we need to have new sensible gun safety regulations and thoughtfulness about this. So that's
Amen.
Another
We'll
thing.
get into a little bit of how we're contributing to that in support of BAWN. But Laura, if you could tell us, from your perspective, how artists at this day and age can be catalysts for dialogue of issues, specifically those that are traditionally uncomfortable for us to talk about, you know, conversation.
Yeah, I think most artists today try to make work, in my mind, that touches on society or a set of societal conditionings or cultural references, and I think that art, luckily, even if it's shocking, which I think your work is more, I think Adam's work is more meditative and thoughtful and like self-reflective, which is good. And that processing of the issue and the representation of it in a visual form with text, like, is already a mediated conversation. A lot of times when we hear, well, it's interesting because Broward is going to produce a Marjorie Stoneman Douglas memorial, so that's coming up, and they're meeting with a lot of the families right now, and it's tough because like the families feel a certain way, and then the administration that's like going to execute the mural or the memorial feels a different way, you know, and then the artist is also mediating a conversation, and there's always like the issue that they're facing is whether to do it on the grounds of the shooting or to do it somewhere else, and like whether that's having anything on the grounds of where it happened is too much for people, and you know, if it makes sense, if it will even make sense by proximity. So there's not a site for it yet. There's this going back and forth about where the site for it will be. And I think when, I'm sure, I was very close in Connecticut. I was working at the University of New Haven when Sandy Hook happened. And that was right, it was before, it was really like during Hanukkah and before Christmas, and the timing of it, and the fact that they were so little, these kids, like, and so innocent and had nothing to do with the violence that came upon them or was bestowed upon them. It really, like, for a couple of weeks, that whole area was really quiet. It was like this deafening silence that you could hear, if you will, like in that area driving through it. And I've driven through there, and it's like people feel so polarized, I think, because there's obvious remorse for the families. I mean, I cannot imagine. But then the families feel very like they've been robbed of life, and then the school administration has to handle it in a procedural way, and the authorities, they have to like really figure out like how long the school should be shut down for, when it should be reopened, if the school should be bulldozed, you know, how to commemorate almost what happened, and then to proceed on with business as usual. Like, there's polarization, you know, where people are on different sides, and also like you have the very conservative right-winged look about guns, like that you should have the right to bear arms and exercise that right, but then the way that guns are acquired is another issue. Like
Can you speak louder?
Oh, I'll try. Well, the other thing is like another side of the coin is, you know, who should have guns, who has access to guns, you know, who's buying guns aftermarket, like how those guns are acquired is another issue, and by people who are crazy or irrational. So there's just so much to process with these big issues. So when artists take on the issues, like what I'm seeing in Adam's work is like, I read some wall text about the way that toys are advertised on Amazon.
Oh, that's something that's really a potent thing to get into.
Like that's one thing that I'm seeing, that you're even questioning, you know, when you're first exposed to a gun and what that means. And there's like the targets in the back. I've never gone to a target practice, but people in my family have, and said that that was thrilling to shoot a gun, you know. And then, I don't know, you have like guns as weapons and guns as toys, and an intersection between like text that talks about child's play and text that talks about being ungunned. That was one thing that I think is really interesting, ungunning. Yeah. Like, how can you be ungunned if you've had a gun? So there's all these issues that Adam is playing with at different age levels. Like, child's play all the way up to adulthood. So I think an artist can really ask others to decompress about, if you can ungun yourself, then what kind of conversation do you have, you know? And then I think about like Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, like there's a Johnny Cash song about like a mom and son talking, where she's like, leave your gun, and then he goes to the bar and shoots everybody.
Oh, wow.
You know? So I think about a lot of different cultural references. And then, so an artist can really take references to pop culture, music, headlines, other artists, like Barbara Kruger. Does anyone know who Barbara Kruger is? How many people know who that artist is? So she is a really important feminist artist. You wrote about Barbara Kruger up there, right? Very important feminist artist that really critiqued consumerism and shopping in public places. So I feel like Adam is saying, well, how do we ungun ourselves? How do we decompress from the gun? And then how do we have a conversation that's a little bit more open? Because if we were in here with like right-wing people and then like very liberal people, there would be maybe an argument happening talking about gun violence and the access to guns. But then you bring an artist in, and an artist can say, I'm thinking about all these different layers. I'm asking you to ungun yourselves and to not bring bias, and then a different conversation can happen. So artists really try to mediate those polarized conversations and make work that's more poetic and more meditative. And I'm going to stop talking that was long.
No, very well put. I want to give Adam a lot of credit. Andrew and myself deal with a lot of artists, and and a lot of artists have a lot of great ideas, but not everybody, I don't think I'll probably be sharing this, takes the time, effort, initiative, and dollars to bring their ideas to life. Not just in the creating of the work, but if you guys don't know, Adam is funding this whole fundraiser, not just to show off his artwork, he's donating the proceeds of the artwork to BAWN. But you know, he feels that this is very pertinent at this stage of his life, at this stage of his career, to do so at a time and an era where things like this are really needed, where artists really can play a role in the healing process and in the education and awareness process. So Adam, if you could just, piggybacking off of that, tell us a little bit about the why. We know the how and what happened with Ted Deutsch, you just mentioned in meeting him, and how that transpired, but really just harp on the why, and why at this stage of your life are you deciding to take this action?
You know, there's that's a good question. There's a guy named Simon Sinek.
Love him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's an English philosopher, I think.
Yeah,
right?
start with why.
Yeah.
One of the most famous TED Talks.
Exactly. And so I think about like listening to him speak about the why of, the TED Talk that I heard was about how businesses and leadership, successful businesses and people who lead, they understand the why. And once you understand the why, then you can begin to kind of like, you can connect with people. And so I think the why for me is a sense of frustration and sadness about the way in which I see our society going. And you know, I was talking to Jared again. Where's Jared?
Right
oh,
there
you are. Jared is an astrophysicist, so these are generally one-sided conversations. And we were having dinner the other night, and you know, we were talking about you know, many things, but this sense of why that I'm doing what I'm doing is about going back and connecting with my childhood in a very odd sort of way, because I was a child of the 60s, and when I was growing up, even though that was a time of a lot of turbulence, it was still a time of a lot of hope. And it wasn't manufactured hope, it was true. I mean, there were people that were really hopeful hopeful about their future. They were hopeful about our society in the face of a lot of problems. I mean, I remember very clearly being a high school senior, and on April 4th, 1968, I was at a rally in the ghetto in Indianapolis where we were hearing Robert Kennedy speak. And Robert Kennedy announced at that rally that Martin Luther King had been killed. And that was powerful. And even in the face of that, and then 3 months later I stood in line all night long to go into St. Patrick's Cathedral to touch his coffin when he was shot. And even in the face of all that, there was this sense of hope. But I don't know where, I mean, I don't know where young people are getting their sense of hope anymore. And so I think that part of the problem is that they're not seeing hope in action in my generation, many of your generation. They're not seeing the generations ahead of them being actively hopeful. And so this is why I'm doing this, because I feel like each one of us can be actively hopeful and give hope to the people that live in this society. So that's why I'm doing this.
Oh, very well put.
I can hear the eye rolling out of this one here.
No, but it's instilled hope. You know, for myself, being born and raised in Broward County, being born and raised in Coral Springs, playing lacrosse on the fields across from Douglas, having my father start the lacrosse program at Douglas and having it hit very close to home to me, I've kind of struggled with how to handle it. But I like to view art as a problem solver and art as a storyteller, art's history, art's communication. Art is how we know who we are, what's going on in the world. So it has, if nothing else, it has instilled hope in me, and I'm super proud and super grateful and humbled to be a part of this initiative, Andrew and myself and the United Group. Could you just tell us a little bit about, with the fundraising for BAWN, what the goal is and what we're really trying to accomplish?
Sure. So for those of you that don't know, that there's a group that rose out of the tragedy of Parkland to dream something, which is the fact that possibly we can amend the Constitution of the state of Florida to ban the sale of future assault weapons here. And part of the petition that you could sign, these yellow sheets of paper, also requires the registration of all assault weapons in Florida. So it's a really super simple thing. Nobody in the future can buy an assault weapon in Florida, and those that own them just need to tell somebody. So, I mean, that seems pretty straightforward. I mean, it's dumbfounding for me to think that in 1994, for 10 years, there was a ban, a federal ban on assault weapons in this country. And, you know, the political process being what it is, the ban at that point expired, and it wasn't an actionable thing that we could get back. So, and there's statistics that prove that mass shootings during that time went down. So that's what the BAWN initiative is, and it's a bunch of citizens. It's not legislators. It's those citizens, those fellow citizens in Florida that just want to take action ourselves and not require elected officials to dilly-dally around with the lives of people that are innocent. So that's what we're doing.
And what is the what's going to be the mechanism to hopefully enact the change?
So what BAWN is doing is BAWN is raising, currently they're raising funds and soliciting signatures in order to supply the Supreme Court, I think, in Tallahassee, Florida, with the signature petitions that would allow it to go to the next stage. But to get it on the ballot, we need about 1 million signatures, because even though you only need 700 and some thousand signatures, because of the bizarre way in which all of this sort of process happens, including in our elections, that so many signatures are just thrown out. I mean, you could not dot your middle initial and it doesn't match your voter registration. And so these sorts of citizens initiatives that are ballot initiatives need to overcompensate for the fact that there's going to be pushback for getting this thing done. So, you know, that's what we're trying to do today. That's what we're going to try to do tomorrow and the week after, and for many weeks until we can get this thing on. But it's like, you know, we have, it's amazing. The more I understand and learn about the judicial process and the legislative process, I mean, it is a very complicated inch by inch by inch. And you know, there's the initiative about, or the legislation about banning teachers in schools is proceeding where the public opinion is that they don't want this to happen. But the legislators up in Tallahassee are pushing and pushing and pushing. And so we as citizens have to take back our right to be in a civil society.
Just to clarify, are we referring to the banning of the teachers having guns in school?
No, what it is arming teachers.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Oh, did I say ban?
You said banning teachers, yeah.
Oh,
we don't
no.
want to ban teachers.
We want to ban them.
Well, he
Don't
wants
have
to
me
ban
as a
teachers.
spokesperson for anything.
So with that being said, I'd like to open it up for any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Where is the money going and who is in charge of the money?
Good question. So the money is going to the office, which has been organized to handle the legislative and fundraising process. The woman that started this, let me tell you a little bit about Gail Schwartz. Gail Schwartz is a woman, diminutive woman, you'll meet her tomorrow, certainly. And her size belies her strength and her determination. And her nephew was murdered at Parkland. And after that, she decided that and then, you know, if you know anything about the story of the aftermath of that, the Parkland students went almost immediately, I think within 2 weeks, or 2 days.
Yeah.
It was like immediately,
David Hogg.
So they went up there and they lobbied. They split up in all, it's very interesting. They lobbied and they split up in all these groups and they matched the interest of the legislator with the interest of the kids, talking about gun violence and about what they could do in a very conservative legislature. And so they were able to bring about, I mean, you know, as much as they could do after Parkland, and Rick Scott signed a bill to restrict something, and it wasn't much. It was like, you know, trying to gnaw a piece of steak with one tooth. But she decided that something needed to be done. And the legislators in our state government will not do it. So she decided to take it on her own. So she's been working tirelessly to do this. So this is Gail, who is the principal energy organizer. But in any of these campaigns, they're very, very complicated in terms of the process and just the logistics of everything. So she has a staff, a small staff of paid people who know how to process this and what steps to take. So the money is donated to BAWN, and with the objective of reaching the 100,000 signatures to be able to get it to the next stage. Once that's done, then it will be rolled out in a much larger way to get the other 900,000 signatures.
You said BAWN?
B-A-W-N. So ban assault weapons now.
We have some paperwork, and then there's some petitions here as well that you can take home with you. And we encourage you or anybody interested to, you know, look them up. And there's other great initiatives as well. This happens to be the one that connected with Adam in this cause. So, any other questions?
Are they a 501c3?
No, they're a 501c4. Yeah.
In the back?
I have a question. So you were working on this before you got involved with?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So what motivated you? You said that it was based on, you know, something about also about your childhood, but what was your main to get you to do this kind of artwork? What brought you to this path to take the, I mean, I know that you just said changing stuff, but like, was it something specific? Were you affected by gun violence? Was it?
No, I wasn't affected by gun violence. I mean, you know, it's a really good question because you can understand that somebody that loses a child or a family member in gun violence, how that would make them feel passionate about what they're doing. And I've asked myself, I mean, believe me, over the last few weeks, I've asked myself a lot, why am I doing all of this stuff? You know, why am I doing it in such a public way? And I just come back to the feeling that all of us need to be actively engaged in some way to change our society.
Did you start this before Part 1 or after?
No, it was before. That piece back there, the black piece, I did about 2.5 years ago. So, but you know, and then the Count Your Blessings piece over here, I have a much larger version of that in my house, and boy, that's a dinner party conversation started, let me tell you. But that piece was done when I was renovating my house about 2 years ago. I actually physically built a section of the wall that could be constructed on. So I would, but how did I decide about that? I love constructivist art, Viennese art. I like that period in the early 20th century and this kind of geometric kind of rhythm of shapes and relationships. And I went online and there are hundreds of different venues to buy targets. I mean, there's targets for the Chicago Police Department, there's the FBI, the CIA, New York City, New York State, the troopers, the this. And they're all, it's kind of from a graphic point of view, they're all very interesting to look at what the graphics are, you know? Because there's one principal operating factor by what creates that thing, and it's a gauge upon which you judge how accurate a shot you are to kill a human being. You know, these are not just kind of outlines, but they're people. Yeah. And that's what I'm discovering. I mean, that piece, the man in the mirror. Yeah. I mean, there's a guy named Justin Sean Crum who was on American Idol or one of those shows, and I'm such a nut for all of this kind of like going back and looking at success stories and watching people succeed even on that. And so he sang this Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. And it is operatic, it's Wagnerian. He is such a powerful presence, and that word change is like this cry. And it's just such an emotional thing. But you look at those lyrics and then you look at the mirror and you look at yourself as being that target and how to change the conversation about that. So that's how that particular series came about.
Can I just ask one more question about the construction of your pieces? Where do you get the guns? I know you said that some of them are toys.
Very good question. So about 2-3 months ago, I was introduced to Gabby Gifford's Fundraiser, who's a woman named, boy, what happens when your brain stops working in the middle of something like this?
No, you're fine.
Baker, her name is Melissa Baker, I think. And so we were talking about this, about what I was doing and how I could contribute to Gabby Gifford's process. And I was telling her I was like composing these things, and I said, oh, I'm buying toy assault rifles on the internet. And it wasn't until I said it out loud that I realized what I was doing. And so that got me down a whole nother rabbit hole, believe me. I mean, if you go into the bathroom and take a look in the bathroom, there's a piece called Christmas Morning in there. And that, I'll let you go into the bathroom, and any more than one person in there, and we're going to wonder what's going on. But go in and take a look at that piece. And actually, this summer, later on, I'm going to be doing some work with Katya, who's right here, and there's an exhibit in Pompano Beach that is on mental health and violence. And I'm exploring children's issues with regard to gun violence in our society. And one of the things that you'll see if you go on my website is that I have certain initiatives that we're going to be working on, and one of them is a really kind of goofy idea, but it's about lollipops. and I want to create a lollipop. And if you go on the website, you can see this. And the campaign is called Let's Lick Gun Violence Once and For All. And I'm approaching somebody to make the lollipops, and hopefully through like the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, we'll roll out selling millions of lollipops to generate funds that the kids can put back into their community to deal with the issues of mental health in the schools. Because, you know, there's a touching story that a friend of mine told me, that a friend of theirs was out shopping with their little daughter to buy new shoes. And this girl tried on these shoes, and you know, I'm 68 years old, I don't know what kids like, but there's these shoes that are like jelly shoes, and they've got little lights that are flashing on and off, and the mother's looking at the little girl, and she's trying these shoes on, and she says, "You like these shoes?" And the little girl says, "Yes, I like the shoes." And she says, "But I'm not gonna get them." And the mom says, "Well, why not?" And she says, "Because they flash lights, and if somebody's shooting in a school, they'll be able to see my feet."
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you know that
I have
story.
3 small children, I know it very well.
So you get children that are of the age of that child is, and they're already aware of this. I mean, there's active shooter drills in schools any longer, you know. So there is a price that is being paid by these kids in terms of their mental health about fear.
And we don't know if those, I'm sorry to
No,
we don't
please.
even know if that's keeping our children, like doing these drills,
Yeah.
is keeping our children and is safer.
Right.
All it is doing is traumatizing them. My son is super sensitive, and like the second, when he was 3 years old, and he did his first shooter drill, I mean, they didn't say that's what it was at 3 years old, but I mean, he was scared to death.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it.
No, I mean, it's a terrible thing to grow up in at that age. Think about what we were doing at 5 and 6 years old.
No. And you have people like my parents compare it to hiding under a desk, but that wasn't real.
No.
It never happened. Like, it happens now.
Yeah.
You know?
So this is where, you know, so the whole story about using the guns
Yeah.
was like an epiphany. At one moment I thought, my God, what am I doing? I'm buying from the same people that I'm actually militating against. So it's kind of like there's this kind of duality there. I'm taking the gun and I'm turning it back on them. But you look at this piece called Child's Play. That manufacturers recommend age 3 years and up. That is in their advertising.
It's crazy.
And you tell me that our society is, I mean, I have a problem with this, with our society and the fact that capitalism at what cost? I mean, what is this beneficial to our society that Amazon is selling that gun to children? I mean, it's crazy to me. And I think that there's lots of other ways in which that is part of the problem of this kind of compromised capitalism, as I like to think about it. I mean, I'm all in favor of people, you know, working hard and making a living and all the rest of the stuff, but there's different, I mean, who needs to create gun violence videos and games and stuff like that? At what price profits? That's what I think.
You have a question?
So,
I already answered it. Any last questions?
I just wanted to say that in my era, we hid it under the desks at school in case a bomb was falling.
I remember when, you know, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were all herded up and we went to church to pray for ourselves.
Amen.
You know?
Times have changed. So the event is called Meet the Artist. We do still have about another hour that will be around here. Please feel free to engage with Adam. Adam, I know you might not be so big on it, but where can they follow you on social media?
I don't know. No. There's our social media guru right there. He's moving with the
So
camera.
it's at Adam Dolle Studio, ADAMDOLLE Studio. We also encourage you to follow BAWN, BAWN. Laura, where can they find you on social media?
I'm on social media as Laura_Marsh on Instagram and Laura L. Marsh on Facebook, and the Art and Culture Center is on Instagram independently, just at Art and Culture Center.
Encourage you, if you haven't been to, please do go check out one of our finest cultural institutions in Broward County, and just give an overview of your of the current exhibit, maybe.
Yeah, the current exhibit that I have up is of for artists that are full-time faculty and administrators. It actually really directly references my life because I work 9 to 5 as a curator, and then I, at night, go to my studio on the weekends. I was trying to tell a friend that is a BP tester like about my life, and he's like, you work like 12 to 16 hours between your job and your art practice. So that's my world. The Art and Culture Center has been around since 1975. It used to be on the beach, Hollywood Beach, and now it's in Young's Circle. And it's an institution that was really fun, like first funded out of advocacy, like local advocacy, to have an art center in Broward. And then now it's in a historic building. So it is in a 1924 house. We're really excited. We just, we're part of a bond to get approved for $1.5 million to expand. So we're thrilled that in the next 10 years or so that we'll have a new addition to our building. So what I do is I'm the curator, so I connect with local artists like Adam, and I put on exhibitions. So I wanted to create a show that was about artists who are also full-time at institutions. So the show's called Firmare is the Color of the Adolescent Sunset. It is a completely playful title. Firmare means cold. An adolescent sunset is kind of, for me, this idea of time passing, that you can never truly return to adolescence, but that all of these artists work with budding artists, artists in their 20s, they teach, they are involved in their community, they're involved in the programming at museums. So the artists are all from South Florida. One is Pete Simmons. He is part of the projects in Fat Village, so one of our locals here who lives in Fort Lauderdale, and he works at the University of Miami. So he's going from Fort Lauderdale to Miami almost every day. And then this other artist, Laura Bustamante, who works full-time at NSU as an education administrator. And then another artist, Justin Long, who teaches at New World School of the Arts. He lives in South Miami. And then an artist from out of town who teaches in Massachusetts, and her name's Jane Cassidy, and she does a lot of filming in Ireland. So
What does she film?
she films the ocean, but in Ireland. So we have like the ocean rolling through our galleries, and it's interesting because all of the artists that I invited, they work in sound, in video, in light, and in sculpture. So it's work that is interestingly non-commercial. So these artists have actually found a safety net in their full-time jobs that financially support them to explore artworks that go outside of the marketplace. One work is about immigration and a lot of the issues of being an immigrant in this country, and the other works are completely experiential. So they're nice. It's a nice show. I'm very proud of it, and it's up through the middle of May. So we have a couple of things coming up on May 2nd. We have like a immersive lunch that's part of Broward's 10 Days of Connection. So you can come and have lunch with us, and I take you through the galleries. And then on May 3rd, we have a culture hour, which is somewhat like this. It's a social event where I have a cocktail. And I invited this artist named Rafa to come and bring these sound works that are interactive to do a spoken word piece. So he'll just be pretty much doing a performance, and you can have a Moscow Mule. So
Art happy hour.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Art happy hour is what I do there for programming. So come by.
And just to piggyback a little bit off of what Laura was mentioning, artists have to travel to show their work, get discovered, collected, supported. So how this all comes together for myself, and why I was happy and proud to get involved, we started a social movement to cultivate culture and community here in Broward County, where I'm from, in an effort to keep people in the know with all the great things that are going on within the arts and culture, to make this a better place to live and not just a better place to vacation. But there's a strong element on support local. Why is supporting local very important, specifically within the arts? Well, oftentimes, unfortunately, our local artists and creatives have to go other places to pursue their craft and their passion and literally their livelihood. And that shouldn't be the case, especially in a place like Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, where, let's just face it, there is no shortage of money here. There is no shortage of art collectors here, but there has been a shortage of artists being supported and being able to be full-time. So the work that Laura does is very relevant, very beneficial. She serves a great purpose to the community, so we really appreciate everything you do at the Hollywood Art and Culture Center. Yeah, amen, amen. The work that Adam's doing this weekend with the fundraiser is also very important. I don't know many other artists that are taking significant dollars out of their piggy banks to fund initiatives that are actually enacting change. And we're fortunate to have gotten picked up in the Sun Sentinel, and NBC6 just came by here today. And I think we're actually really going to be successful in raising the awareness and raising the consciousness and getting people, to be a little bit more conscious of the conversation that we're having and the issues that are plaguing our community. And just to go back to what I was mentioning before, art is a problem solver. So hoping art can help solve this problem. There's another person that's helping contribute to the local art scene here in Fort Lauderdale, who opened her doors graciously to allow us to use this beautiful space. And I would like to obviously give a big thanks and have Miss Abby Laughlin come up here. If you guys Googled it, yes, this used to be an art church supply store space, but Abby has done an absolutely incredible job in renovating this space, half of this block, half of this community in Middle River. So could you just tell us a little bit about where we are and what you've been doing here in Middle River?
Well, we are in the middle, and I always sort of gravitated towards things that are in the middle. I feel like we're losing the middle class, and this was sort of an area of Fort Lauderdale that was a bit forgotten, and also very, very impacted by crime and gun violence. And it was actually the neighbors here that rose up and took this neighborhood back. And that is one of the first things that happened was people started to feel safe here. Then the city came in and made a big investment into the infrastructure. They put in the sidewalks and the bike lanes and the lights. And I felt that if the city was going to invest here in this neighborhood, I would invest as well. So my idea was to kind of get a collaboration of buildings and curate them, very carefully to help create community. Do more events like this. We've hosted some very, very special events here. We hosted, if anyone knows about So Far, Songs from a Room. They are sort of a secret songwriter organization where you don't know until the day before or the day of where the performance is going to be. And they've, I think this week there are 9 Coachella artists that got their start playing in So Far, Songs from a Room. So I have let them use that, and hope to do more events. And I'm just thrilled that everyone came out to meet Adam. I think he is absolutely just an incredible human being, and I'm honored to know him. Thank you.
How many of you, is this the first time that you've been to this area?
15th Street.
Right. Hopefully it's
All
not.
right.
Hopefully it's not the last. If you want another excuse to come, tomorrow is the main fundraiser event, where, if you notice on the flyer, there's a lot of noteworthy names: Congressman Ted Deutsch, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, our Mayor Dean Trantillis, and then there is another Jerry Farmer, Mayor of Sunrise. There's another noteworthy name who's going to be making an appearance, whose aptly named song is tied to this gentleman by the name of Michael Franti, who performed yesterday at the Tortuga Music Festival. He's going to be here for a very intimate appearance. So if you would like to be a part of what's going to be a very, very memorable night, we encourage you to come back tomorrow at 6:30. We have the flyers here. We encourage donations that do support BAWN. Don't be scared by the numbers that are on the form.
We want to open it up to a broader kind of group of people, and certainly there are those people that want to contribute. but the flyers are there as a guide. But we want to see everybody here. It's not a matter of money; it's a matter of energy. It's a matter of kind of people changing the way they're thinking about this thing. And it's not only gun violence; it's about who we are as citizens. You know, we need to take back the opportunity to have a civil society and a civil conversation about it. But in addition to that, open bar, food trucks, fun, music. Come meet your congressman and tell him about this.
And your mayor.
And your mayor. And it's going to be a really great time. We couldn't do this without the support of a lot of the initiatives and groups that are here to support us. So the Women Voters of Broward County, League of Women Voters of Broward County, Moms Demand Action, BAWN, and then also the volunteers and the team, Megan, Ben, Dave, Andrew, Zoe, Katya, everybody that's, you know, literally taking time out of their life on the weekend to support the arts, to support your community. This is it's donation based, so we encourage you, you know, give what you can. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Adam, Laura, myself. I'm Evan Snow at Choose954 at Art Fort Lauderdale. I'm an open book. And we really genuinely appreciate you guys taking the time out of your life to come out here on a Sunday. And we're going to hang around. You feel free to, you know, chit chat, continue the discussion, and let's take a group photo. If somebody can take one of us, and thank you guys for participating.